And so when I came to Costa Rica, I was basically down to 3 things. And I feel like they're my birthright. I feel like I have to have these 3 things in order to arrive to the highest place of consciousness and highest place of purpose in this lifetime. They're on the physical plane, but by having those 3 things, it allows you to elevate into the spiritual. And that would be clean air, pure water, and fertile land. Those 3 things were all I wanted and needed when I left the States. And that's what I've come here for. That's my basis here. And with that, everything else has followed, you know. So when I think of pure water, that means bathing. You know, I was bathing, finding new ways of bathing and elimination, new ways of movement. I released clothing for long periods at a time. There were times when not until maybe 5 p.m. at night, I would put clothing on because I was here in my oneness. There was no one else here. There was no shame. We were all natural here. And I wanted to be as vulnerable and open to everything else. I wanted to feel the wind current on my body. I wanted to feel the sun. The first time that I ever felt the sun sparkling on my backside, it was an amazing feeling to walk naturally through the land here.
This is episode 53 of the Ownstream podcast, featuring Amy Schrift.
Welcome to the Ownstream podcast. I'm Teresa Scoba.
I'm Stephen Shelley.
And we're so excited and proud and just honored and full of love sharing this interview with Amy Schrift. We had such an amazing day today, magical day at Amy's farm. Myself, Stephen, and Sophia. So you will see that I am the only interviewer here. Stephen, we didn't have childcare for Sophia. We're in the middle of our travels in Costa Rica, and so Stephen and Sophia and I went to Amy's farm today, and Stephen and Sophia enjoyed the farm and the surroundings, which Stephen will talk about in a minute, while I conducted the interview. So it actually ended up being quite a lovely day, and what a tremendous magical place Amy has created here in Costa Rica. Absolutely rooted her home in nature. And she greeted us. I wanted to say, we pulled up in our big, giant vehicle up to Amy's farm, ground, the door of Amy's grounds. And we walk through, and Amy, like, her presence is so striking. Like, she seems like she just carries this stillness that she's cultivated through many hours of silent observation and work in nature. She walks up to you with such a presence and an awareness, and she's arresting in this very powerful way. Walks up to us, and I'm carrying Sophia, and she has a butterfly on her finger for Sophia that's just absolutely seems one with her. It is at total peace, resting on her finger, and she walks up and just kind of gently hands her hand over to us with this butterfly, and it's like, welcome to my home, with a hug. It was such a magical moment that just continued on from there.
Yes, and one little note about Sophia, you will hear her at the end of this conversation. Amy has a lot to say. She's really well-spoken. She's very eloquent, and she ties a lot of things together. There's a lot to digest in this conversation. And so after about an hour and a half of you guys talking, Sophia we could hear you in the distance, but I think she finally realized, like the trajectory of how to get to you guys. And anyway, she started wandering over there, and next thing you know, we were kind of right upon the interview. So you'll hear Sophia at the end. I take over the very, very end because Teresa needed to deal with Sophia. Sophia was missing her mommy. So anyway, I took over at the very, very end, but
and it was okay. It was just the right time to end.
Oh yeah, we needed to wrap up.
Time.
We needed to eat, and Amy made us this beautiful stew, a chili stew with plantains and beans and collards. Were those collard greens? It was really, really good. Yeah, so Amy, I guess she's been in Costa Rica since 2005, since 12, 13 years at the time of this interview. Prior to that, she lived in New York City. She had a career in the arts as a trumpet player, which is pretty interesting, and grew up some in San Diego. So her path and our paths definitely intersect in a few interesting ways. But she found this land, bought this land, and eventually moved to this land. She'll tell you the full story. The part I love is her initial time there on the land, kind of transitioning from an old life to the new life, and how all these instinctive things began to happen. And one of them, which was really powerful, she began to sleep out underneath the stars. And she has so many tantalizing things to say about that. I want to go out right now and sleep under the stars because of that. It's just so what you can receive from that kind of communion with nature is so strong. And I really think that if the yearning and the longing, if you feel a sense of home in nature that you're missing, that you want to reconnect with, boy, you are in for such a treat. Amy is an authority, like a world-class authority on that subject. She has done it. And as Teresa says, her presence reflects that. She feels like earthy in all these wonderful, marvelous ways. And being in her presence is very special. And her property reflects that. So, what else do we want to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, she tells that story, I say in the interview, and she says, like when you're in New York City or when you're in these urban environments, there's so much craving for nature. Like there's always I want to get into nature. Like I know that a lot of people feel that. And she really has this magical journey where she had a rapid transformation where she knew she needed that and started to create this natural life in New York City. And then this property came upon her, and she came here and started it from scratch and was just living out and, living in nature and being naked, working in nature. And it's so powerful that it just came to her intuitively and she had to do it. She was called, and now she's called to give that gift to others, which she talks about at the end of the interview. And she talks very eloquently about what is happening with our disconnection from nature, what is happening, that depression, anxiety, all these disorders are because we are so far away from our true nature and our natural lives. And the gifts that can come from living a more natural life. And the other thing that Stephen and I wanted to be sure to talk about here was its effect on us. So we've been here in Costa Rica about a month. We're looking for a home. We're looking to create our own community and our own home and our own place for conscious, for the uplifting of consciousness, which she talks very clearly about her own experience and wanting that for others through her home and what she's created in her farm there. And we've been staying in, kind of traditional homes, I guess I would say here, homes that would be fairly comfortable. We don't really watch TV. They have TVs in them. They have Wi-Fi. They're just traditional, just traditional places to live, I guess I would say. And we went out there and, in the homes, in the home structures, they're completely open to nature. There's no windows, she's at one with insects and animals, and everything comes into her home here and there. There weren't not any in her home while we were there, but what I'm saying, it's completely open and embracing. And we were conducting the interview from the balcony of one of her homes, and there was kind of a screen shut, and she opened it up before we started talking because she wanted to have the view of the trees while we were speaking and that impact of that. And you could hear insects everywhere, and you are in nature, And like Stephen said, Amy began by sleeping under the stars. She only created these more home-like structures when she met Bill, her partner, a handful of years ago, and they built some more home-like structures and they welcomed people there. But Amy really was just right in nature, and these homes are too. And I think it caused Stephen and I to really look at our, again, we use the word domestication on our recent podcast, but just our own domestication, how, we can be here and still largely disconnected. We're on our laptops at night, we're working at night. Amy talks about not being in tune with the rhythm of nature in terms of the cycles of darkness and light. And, it's just amazing how many ways we are disconnected. And we had this really profound experience there about, another point as we've been kind of revisioning along the way on our own path here, what do we want? We want the impact of nature. That's very clear to us. We don't want to come here and just recreate our Western life.
Yeah, and it seems like across the board, there's a spiritual call being felt by many, many people. Many of you listening, many people that we've met who are listeners of the show, and many people who are being introduced to the show through us are all feeling that call: return to nature, reconnect with nature, live in the trees, live in the woods, live by the ocean. And Amy is a marvelous example of someone who's completely done that with very little tether to her old life. There's Wi-Fi that they turn on when they need it on this property, and that's about it. I guess there was a little electricity. I saw some plugs, but the bare minimum. It's really very open, very inclusive of the surroundings, and there really is a oneness felt there. Quick shout out to our friend and listener. I hope I pronounce your name right, Noelle Ehlers, who helped steer us to Amy. They, I guess, were friends in high school. And when Noelle learned that we were going to Costa Rica, we put out an APB for people to interview, and she steered us to Amy Schrift. So big thanks to her. So we'll be back afterwards to wrap up. Sit back and relax and enjoy the sounds, both of Amy and Teresa and everything else in this amazing interview.
Okay, so Amy, welcome to the Ownstream podcast. It's so good to be here with you. And I'm sitting here. You can hear the wonderful sounds of Amy's home and farm here in Costa Rica. And we've been here, Stephen and Sophia and I have been here for about an hour and a half, and I feel in a completely different energetic state than when I arrived. So it's pretty special. Amy's been giving us a tour of her home here, and it's magical. We'll have pictures in the post and video. Video especially, hopefully you'll hear some of these sounds because I'm so glad we can pick them up here. I've been really excited about this conversation because, Amy, you're doing something that I've had visions of doing for a long time, but have felt like a lot of people, I think, feel really very intuitively drawn to nature, yearn for nature, want to recreate their lives, and a lot of kind of mental noise gets in the way about like, how would I ever do that? I'm so domesticated. I've lived in an apartment or concrete city my whole life. Like I start to get in these, how would I ever do that? So it's so empowering to sit here with you. And also we have some of those like external story commonalities about like growing up in San Diego and living in New York, and sort of you were about my age when you had, I think, your big awakening and transformation. So anyway, I feel very connected. It's exciting to be here. So welcome. Maybe we can get started. I know that you had a rapid transformation that happened. And when you were, about 37, that led you to move here to Costa Rica in 2005. Maybe you can tell us a little bit to get started on getting to know your backstory, about what your life was like before that. Maybe a little bit about how you grew up, but especially how you were living in your 20s and 30s before you had this transformation take place.
Okay, welcome again. Nice to have you here. So I am from San Diego, California, and was born and raised there in La Mesa, East County, one of 5 and a twin. My mom didn't know she was having twins, so right to the moment of birth, I think my sister was born, and the doctor left the room, and she started to scream and said, "Why didn't you cut the cord?" And they said, "There's another one coming." And I guess I was the second one out. So it was quite a beginning. I imagine there was a bit of drama there in that moment. But basically raised in Southern Cal, and our family, we were into music. Like we all took music lessons, part of, joined the school band, and I started piano lessons young and then got into trumpet so that I could be part of school activities and school bands and things. And we basically had a normal middle-class upbringing, went to summer camps, and, I would say happy childhood. The home was our home was clean. My mom was home with us. It was amazing when you think back now that many of our mothers, if you're a little bit older, were actually home for us. So I remember her being there when we'd get home from school, and a clean home, and it felt truly like a home, like a safe, nurturing space. That was really lovely. We'd do family trips and things. But I did get into music at a young age, and we had, when I think about our surroundings, we had a garden and fruit trees and things like that. But I think my focus was more on the the sociality of being a twin, of just fully embracing life as you go through school. It's sort of all-encompassing, right? What school and after-school activities and just growing up, if you want to call it normal, quote-unquote, normal life, right? And my mom tried to have healthy food on the table, although there was not really an awareness that maybe we shouldn't be using microwaves or maybe not having Campbell's soup, in the closet and cereals and things like that. So, but she did her best, and we had salad, and we were only allowed to have soda once a week, and we had non-fat milk instead of, there were some things that were considered. So that was nice. So anyways, I basically, was in San Diego through high school, and then I went to UC Berkeley for university education, studied economics. That was a real eye-opener, Berkeley, because it was the first time that I was around other cultures and other peoples, quite different from my upbringing in San Diego. So I used to say it was more of an education outside of the classroom than in, although it was a great way to study, new things that I hadn't really checked out in high school, and I decided to do a third year abroad. And I went and studied in Israel for a year and went to the University of Jerusalem. So that was a fun, really exciting year. Kind of, again, opened me up to travel. And I made a commitment that when I graduated from university, I wanted to do a trip around the world. And at the time, you could get these student tickets and a whole booklet of tickets. So my sister and I, basically, she also went to UC Berkeley. We graduated, and we started we temped all summer. And I remember a great aunt had passed away and gave us each a small sum of money. Basically, we did everything we could to raise funds, and we started out on a year journey around the world. It was literally a book of tickets. We went through 27 countries that year. It was quite amazing, really an eye-opener. And at that time, we remember hearing a lot about Japan, and we didn't have time to stop on that journey. So we came back, and I went to decided to check out the other Berkeley in Boston, Berkeley School of Music. So being a trumpet player, I had a boyfriend at the time who got a full scholarship for tenor sax. So I did kind of a crazy thing. I basically audited full time. Right? So there I was, and I checked out classes, and so I ended up studying a couple semesters auditing. We found some work, and I started my first Japanese class there. So after about a year of doing that, my sister and I left for Japan, which ended up being 3 years of living there. It was just an incredible experience. Again, it changed my whole perception of things, because upon arriving, the only way we could kind of rationalize what was happening around us was to think an opposite. So we think we would do it this way, then they do the opposite. But over time, those borders, so to speak, sort of meshed, and we started studying Japanese. The height, I think, of my studies was when I took university entrance exams in Japanese. Like, that was, for me, my own marker of all the time we had put into. The reason why we studied Japanese in Japan while we were there teaching English. We had heard that you could make income. A lot of students were going to pay off college loans and things. In our case, we didn't really have them, because at UC Berkeley at the time, I think it cost us a whopping $600 per semester, and we actually worked in college and paid most of our own schooling expenses. But we wanted to have a profound experience with the Japanese people, and we realized that the level of English that they had wasn't enough to go beyond. Sometimes it was your name and your blood type. They're really fascinated by asking about blood types and so forth. So we ended up studying full-time for over 2 years. And we created nurturing friendships. We both had Japanese boyfriends. After around 3 years, it actually felt like 6, because the time moves very quickly there. People are when you go on the subway in Japan, you run. You don't even walk, you run. And so everything was moving very quickly. And I was playing jazz gigs with the trumpet. I was so busy life, like teaching English, studying tea ceremony, playing gigs, studying Japanese, having a relationship in Japanese, like expressing myself that way was really great. So after that, I decided I was feeling a calling of starting to get into kind of Latin music, that I needed to go to South America. And so we basically left Japan. My sister went into graduate studies in San Diego, and I left for South America. And the idea had been was to travel by myself for a year. And I started in Ecuador because I wanted to learn Spanish and say, well, if I'm traveling by myself as a woman, it's definitely good to understand the language and so forth. What happened was I was in Ecuador for about 5 months and was sitting in with playing some jazz gigs and stuff, and met a Colombian woman, and she showed me a glamorous picture of these women playing salsa on the cover of a record album. And she said, come on, I want to take you, you got to meet these people. And basically, I changed all my plans, went to Colombia. I auditioned for this band that was on the record cover, got in, I guess, on the premise that I had like a flugelhorn, so I was like, I could add this jazzy element maybe to I don't know. So I basically moved to Colombia and ended up staying there 2.5 years. So half a year in Ecuador and 2.5 years in Colombia. In Cali, I joined an all-female salsa orchestra. And it's your life. You can't plan weekends or anything. You have rehearsals during the week. And then you go on, you do concerts. And we did travel to Europe. It was quite amazing. I think at the time it wasn't super clear that there was an American woman in the band, because you have dark curly hair, and we had all of our little outfits, and I just kind of fit in. And it was kind of a crazy, wild experience playing on stages in front of thousands and thousands of people. Like, I'll never forget it. Like, I remember a concert in Holland as far as I could see. I thought, wow, it was just moments that I remember clearly. So basically, around 2.5 years passed, and people were telling me, like, what are you doing here? If you're into music and you've got a U.S. passport, you should be in New York. Like, New York, like, we would give a finger, we would give an arm. These were people who had, Latino musicians who didn't really have the ways or the means to get to the U.S., and they had heard so much about it. So that was kind of drummed in my head. My family's originally from New York, actually. Both my parents are from New York. And so I said, I'm going to do it. And I basically showed up to New York, I think around 1998 or so, with a trumpet and a suitcase full of stuff. And I really didn't have any connections except for a place to stay for a month. And my thing was, I'm going to start from scratch. I started playing merengue gigs with Dominican bands, because I could speak some Spanish up in the Inwood area in the Bronx. Yeah. And I was on the subway till wee hours of the morning. Sometimes I was coming home at 4 a.m. and people were, it was that time. Yeah, some people were going really early, so they were in business clothes, and I was the only woman in the band, doing this, and that was my start. And I started auditioning and joining some salsa things here and there, and then I decided to study and get a degree in jazz performance at City College in New York. So basically, I was studying music and making connections to finally, I met someone at the university. We created a small little company called the New York Jazz Outfit, and basically what we were doing was offering duo, trio, quartet, quintet, whatever people wanted for their functions. And we were, I must have gone to 1,000 restaurants in New York City asking if they'd like to have a jazz trio or a jazz duo. Interestingly enough, by the time I left New York, they were replacing live music with DJs. So it was cheaper for a restaurant to have a DJ, for $100, $150, than pay a jazz trio $100 a person or something for the night. I really don't know how today students graduate with a degree in jazz music and owe $60,000 to $80,000 to a university with $50, $100 gigs or something, right? It's not easy. This whole thing about institutionalization of the arts, right? I see it has great purposes too, but it's very expensive in terms of what you can count on as far as a career. in music. And I had moments where when I was performing, well, actually, a lot of important moments. One of them was a very huge transformation that happened to me in New York City. But some of those aha moments were when I was performing and realizing that I wanted to reach people. And I was trying to do it through a piece of metal, tubing, as a trumpet. And I would move my bell around and I would kind of focus on people and I would try to play my heart out in a ballad or a tune. And I realized, some of them are feeling this, but in general, people are there in their own space having their meal. This may not be my highest voice. Like I enjoyed performing, but I think I had a moment when I realized we gave a performance in a New York public library. We got a standing ovation, and I remember putting my trumpet in my case after that and saying, "This is it. Like I'm closing this case for good, almost in a way." I don't know. It was kind of a realization that I think this might be it. Shortly thereafter, I moved to Costa Rica, but I've basically taken you up to. I hope that's answered your question about bringing up to New York City.
It was beautiful. I wanted to ask you before getting into what happened, the transformation. You studied economics in college, and it sounds like you might have been headed on kind of like a traditional path, and maybe not. Were you always somebody who kind of did things differently, or was there just something in you? What was it in you that kind of just had you following your own path? It seems like the own path you were creating from when you left college, or maybe even before.
I remember, my dad definitely taught us to think for ourselves, and he would go sometimes a little bit against the grain. I think that left an impression on all of us. Actually, in a way, I was actually studying to be a lawyer. I took the LSATs. I wouldn't say at that point that I was. My outward path was so different. I think what was happening, there were stirrings inside. I always felt fairly confident as maybe a kid, clear and centered. And I always remember, even growing up for women, when we start to develop on all that, I remember wanting to have, boys be interested in me for who I was, not for the way I looked. I remember, it's me, it's my dynamic that I want to attract people so that we have a meeting of minds. It was like I was looking for the deeper, profound part of life experience, I think, fairly early on, And so outwardly, I don't think I realized what I was in for, actually, but I think it all sort of blossomed. Yeah. It blossomed by taking that leap of faith that I could go to New York City and jump in with zero, right? For most people, it's usually they have a job. They have a job set up when you move like that. Or in New York City is a pretty, I'm not going to say harsh, but if you don't know what you're doing there, I think it can take over a bit, and you kind of need to know. So I had clear will and intent. And I think that was enough, even with the trumpet in the suitcase and the clear intention that I was there to have a musical journey. That's what New York was all about for me.
Yeah, I love the inner confidence, and also just knowing that you were on a journey, or that it was about that journey and that unfolding. Because I think a lot of times we're looking for a very specific external result or external things to keep us safe or whatever. So I think that, I can feel that drive in you. So you had the moment where you put your instrument in your case and you were like, that's it. What transformation happened after that for you? Or maybe it was already happening. It sounds like that you could feel that your calling was to be manifested in a different way. What happened next?
So basically we had a jazz trio, and we did a lot of gigs, and again, I mentioned kind of restaurant gigs and things, museums and all sorts of private parties and things. I think it was one night when we were sitting down to eat, and when you're a musician, you basically are served the typical restaurant standard food. So out came the bread and the spaghetti and this and that, and I remember feeling that this food is not it doesn't feel nourishing or sustaining in a way where I have to eat this food and then go back and perform again. And the trumpet is so physical, right? You're always thinking about breathing and posture. You're holding up this weight. Extremely physical. Your reed, just like on a saxophone, the reed is your lips. Your lips are vibrating. So it's a lot of outflow, a lot of output. And I thought, this isn't doing it. I'm not feeling... this food didn't bring me energy. I want to come back and play and with gusto. And so it was just a moment like that. I think what happened was that night I went home and somehow raw foods, I think there was a magazine or something nearby I had taken from somewhere, and I saw an article on a family who was eating raw foods or living foods. And wow, I just read one article about the family. It really hit home to me very deeply. And so like a little light went on. And at that moment, I thought, I think I'm going to look into this a little more. So basically, I looked online and I found that there was a weekly meeting of a raw food support group, meeting downtown on Monday nights. And I went once and I went twice. And that was in the span of a week. And that was it. In 1 week, I made that decision that I'm going to 100% living foods. It was a super fast decision. It was extreme in the way that it meant drastic changes in my living food habits. Now, what I didn't realize was that was just the tip of the iceberg. The changing the food meant that on a vibrational level, I was going to change. My consciousness changed. If you don't believe that you are what you eat, try eating food that's, not good for you, and you'll see how you feel. We certainly are, our vibration and consciousness is absolutely affected by what's being put into this vessel, so to speak. And immediately I started feeling changes. So basically I went into 100% living foods diet, which is a journey, I would say, of about 8 years in length. I mean, really, I didn't touch a piece of, cooked food, a grain of rice, a grain of sugar, salt. I don't even think I was boiling water. Very kind of natural hygiene led, very clean mono meal type eating. I didn't really get into the gourmet raw foods. I thought they were quite heavy and didn't feel good eating those. So I had drastic physical changes happen very quickly. I dropped weight. People were asking me if I was okay. And for me, it was opening new horizons about paying attention to the outdoors suddenly, not wanting to close my curtains at night. So I started realizing that, well, if you live in an apartment and you turn lights on at night with curtains open, basically everyone can see everything you do. So for me, that meant lights off at night. I started trying to kind of focus into the natural rhythms. Well, it gets dark around sunset. Can I take care of my daily activities so that at night I can just gaze naturally upwards to the light? Where is the light at night if you're not using artificial? And that's upward. Our gaze usually goes up and we look at something that's elevating. It's literally high up in the sky, the stars and the moon. So I was sleeping with the curtains open, windows open, of course in the summer months, and started to sleep on the floor. And do you want me to go into some of these many transformations that happened in a short time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So the food was just the beginning. I was absolutely overjoyed. I remember I could not believe that someone could sit down to a bowl of oranges as a meal. I was totally floored. I remember asking, so what do you eat? And one guy said, well, I come home to lunch and I cut up 10 oranges. I thought, oh, you're kidding. I mean, really?
How did you eat before? Was this a total transformation?
So when I started world travels around the age of 18 or 19, that year we went, I'm trying to remember if it was vegan or vegetarian. Definitely vegetarian. We stopped all meat and flesh. I can't remember if we may have had some eggs on that trip. And that started a whole process into vegetarian, I think vegan, vegetarian. There may have been a part in New York where I went back and had some flesh, just checking in with my body, but it was mostly many years of eating that way before I went to raw food. So I'm not saying I went from a full, and certainly not the SAD diet,
Yeah.
Right. The standard American diet too raw. I think that would have been a huge, huge leap. However, even that, the 100% living foods is a leap. It's huge leap because I think I was eating Ezekiel bread and I was eating some cooked food and all of that. So I really had to, it felt like a freedom. It felt like simplification. I didn't know where I was going with all of that, and I knew that the food, it wasn't all about the food. The food was just part of this journey. So basically my consciousness and vibration is changing. I'm spending every waking moment I can outdoors. So that gets me, when I'm not with my trumpet, when I'm not teaching, when I'm not studying, when I'm not performing, I'm out in the parks. And I started taking my shoes off, and I remember bringing a blanket, laying down and going into like a deep sleep. It was a kind of rest that I don't know if it was a deep sleep. I actually think it was a light sleep. I was aware of everything happening, but I felt I was sinking, that I was really connecting with Earth, why I was actually on the Earth, And it wasn't the same when I'd go back up into the 21st floor, studio apartment. And so I was yearning to be outside, and I often removed my shoes, and I took a wild foraging tour in New York and then in Central Park. So every waking moment I was outside, and I'd go out every day. And then I started checking out books from the New York Public Library on spiritual topics, everything I could get my hands on. So I think you're allowed to have 10 books at a time. I maxed out. And I'd go through those 10 books, and I'd get 10 more and 10 more. Like, I was voracious. I was reading out in the parks. So while I was doing that, I was grounding and touching the earth. I was under the open sky. I was foraging, I was walking. I was starting to pick fruit because I found out where it was. Great mulberries near the Fairway uptown in the Harlem area. And I found where there was like wild persimmons and crab apples in Central Park. People were looking at me a little oddly that I was taking like natural wild foods, like what's she doing and where's her shoes and all of these things. But I also started sleeping on the floor. And in a studio apartment, I think I had I don't know if it was a queen bed. It may have been. There wasn't a whole lot of room. I mean, so there I was next to the empty bed. I wanted to ground. And the way to do that, even though I was high up, was to get down to the floor level. So what I was able to do was orient my head towards magnetic north. And I heard that was beneficial for sleep. So suddenly I was eliminating all these structured ways that we live, where your bed is in a certain position. Why do you have to sleep the same way every night? Why do you have to sleep in the same place every night? So slowly but surely, and I very much developed that here, is I was living nomadically, but in one place. It was, especially when so we have the bathroom and we have the bedroom. These spaces determine where we do things, but in a natural setting, we eliminate when we need to, and you may be in the back, you may be somewhere else, right? And I don't mean like, yes, in the cityscape, you'd find the nearest public toilet and all that, but I mean in a way here where we're in a natural surrounding here where we can do something with that elimination and create support like fertilizer for microorganisms, right? Yeah. What can we do so that we're not actually creating waste, So it was just getting into that. In New York City, I also took a natural vision course. Eye-opening, literally, right? So I learned to embrace the blur. I had worn contact lenses for about 25 years straight. I never really got into glasses. Lenses were coming out at the time, and I went right into contact lenses. I traveled with them. I remember carrying around that crazy enzyme solution and all of the contact. I was so tired of poking my fingers in my eyes, before disposable, which I probably wouldn't have done anyways because I'm not, the idea of leaving something in overnight or all of these things. So I remember I took the natural vision course, and I remember putting my contact lenses in for the last time. I put them in the case and put them away and realized, you're going to have to embrace the blur. So talk about taking a risk and stepping out. I couldn't even see to my feet at first. I couldn't see street signs. I was riding a bike. I was way into swimming. I did synchronized swimming in college at Berkeley. And all through my travels, my way of movement was in water. What I didn't realize at the time was all of the chlorine and the chlorine gas. And so basically, once I turned, into, I don't want to say turn raw. I just got into living foods. I also felt to me I need to release those other toxic things too. Like if I'm doing all this work and releasing foods that don't serve me, well, I have to look at what I'm doing too. So I really didn't want to get into pools anymore with chlorine. And I used to go to Riverside Park and swim there on a pretty regular basis. I'd ride my bike, jump in the pool, come out, come back. And I thought, okay, let me jump back to vision, and then I'll move on to the whole yoga thing. But I realized that the idea of corrective vision isn't really correcting our vision. It's creating, we have this thing we call 20/20, which means we can see everything happening at all moments around us. What I perceive that to be as a massive amounts of information pouring in at all time. And it's sometimes we need softening vision. When you're wearing what we call corrective vision, over time your eyes actually get worse. So in the end, it's not really correcting your eyes. They're probably going to get worse over time. It's giving you a vision that I find to be very hard line, very hard. The times that I do wear glasses now, which is really only for night driving, or if I feel the need to see something like small print or something, I don't need it. I see very clear close-up. It would be for something, a sign maybe. I don't really like it. I feel it's harsh, and it's not the way I want to see. What I love about the natural vision is, so basically I did embrace the blur, and over time my vision did get better. And I find that I have moments of absolute, and I started a practice of sun gazing. I really should mention that because that was the first time I looked into a deep light that I was told never to look into. And that's really, and I felt empowered. I was doing it at safe times of the day, like the first hour from sunrise and the last hour before sunset. And I knew that, I heard, okay, so it can start activating the pineal gland, pituitary, and all of these. We have supposedly a lot of spiritual glands that are dormant in our brain. We always talk about we use such a small part. Well, what's the left? What's that about? Are these? And so the sun gazing did become part of my daily practice. I was out there at sunrise with the people with their dogs and leashes. We were sharing this tiny little square of earth where the dogs would poop and I would be.
I love that.
It was special. And I got into a little bit of Qigong practice and yoga. And of course, this natural vision, I actually feel the sun gazing helped. I had a lot of faith that this was the journey I needed to be on. And by embracing the blur, I finally had the ability for myself to soften and clarify my vision when needed. I feel like now when I need perfect vision, I ask for it and it comes in. So if I'm walking on a path from here to the forest, which I do a daily walk into the back of the land, I ask for clarity when I need it. I want to see the path. And I did have an interactive event with a fer-de-lance this past year, which I'll tell you about. I was bit by, it's called a terciopelo. I'm still learning from that experience. But just to be fully aware, it's good to have clear vision to see something rustling in the leaves, and I get it when I need it, and that's all. And so I can soften now as I need to. So I really, will I ever use glasses? And I don't know. Just I carry them with me, and only in the moment that I would absolutely need to. So the sun gazing, and I mentioned some of the other things. I think that's, basically all the things I've just mentioned happen in a very short window of time.
How long?
I could even say several months, all this was happening, right? So I was clear that I was on the path with the living foods. I was clear that I had released any kind of quote-unquote corrective vision. I had my natural vision. I was eating natural food only. And I remember one day asking myself, so if you had to live on 5 foods, if you were down to 5, what would they be? Okay, because I'm eating, salads and fruit, of course, nuts and seeds and all these things.
What were you eating? I interrupted you when you were talking about bowls of oranges. So tell us a little bit about what you were eating.
What I was eating. So I joined the Park Slope Food Co-op in Brooklyn because I was looking for a way to get local, right? We want to eat local and fresh, right? So, and I would go to the Fairway up in Harlem, and I was eating whatever was in season. So I was trying to get organic only, basically veggies and fruits. And if I had enough of something, I would do mono meals, like a bunch of oranges or watermelon or bananas, pears, apples. These are things, the fruits, the persimmons. Love the persimmons. And into figs. And, I realized, so I came up with this one law of food combining. There's like one. You can bring it all down to one. I remember I had Herbert Shelton's food combining guide up on the refrigerator. And I realized, well, it really only comes down to one, and that's don't. There's no other animal in nature. There's no sandwiches in nature. And no one else. There's no such thing like we know that bears eat honey and they eat berries and they eat fish, but never together. There's no mixing in nature. And that's why we don't, you don't see animals walking around with seems like poor digestion or indigestion or burping or all of these things that happen. So I realized, I might as well go right to the mono meals, which means eating one thing until you're satiated. And I realized, what does it mean when we sit down and we have 10 to 15 things on a plate? Are we getting even enough of any of those things? Does that really mean that that's really the best way to eat? Like, doesn't our stomach have to choose what it digests? And so I think we end up passing a lot of undigested food. So, and I like the idea of really getting with the fruit and its essence. Like, not the process of eating became not just sitting down to a plate of things cut up that you can't even recognize where they came from anymore. I wasn't into smoothies and blending and all of that. This was about taking an orange in my hand, smelling it, perceiving it, giving thanks, touching it, the full experience of what I call nourishment. It was way beyond the actual putting the flesh into my mouth. But even then, taking time to taste it, and that's what happens when all you need, and I would talk about fast food. There is no faster food than taking a cutting board with a knife and opening up a papaya or something. Yeah. That's fast food. And it's real food. And that's where I'd want to go if we're going to talk about food. So at that point and until now, my thing is I eat real food. And at this point, it's not so important. I think food is a very personal journey. Like, to ask me what I eat or what you eat, hopefully we eat what we need at the time we need it. If it's real food, it's medicine. And anything else is not medicine, could be harmful, could be toxic. So we need a massive real food movement. A real food movement would eliminate anything that comes in a box that's been packaged that has a shelf life. Anything that's in a metal can, right? When canned food came out, there was a big movement for the dry foods too. And I actually read about an event where the entire Senate, the U.S. Senate, was prepared a lunch of dried foods. This was when everything was kind of coming out at once about preservation of food. And it was all rehydrated. And they were fed a completely rehydrated meal of dried food. Somehow, after that event, the canned food industry basically squashed the dry food industry. And we ended up with a huge, basically everything was in metal cans. Now, what are the consequences of eating food that's been packed in aluminum metal? Can you just imagine with what we know today, when you have liquids sitting inside metal with shelf lives for months or years? We really need to look at that. We're meant to eat food that's fresh, that's local, that's free of agrotoxins, that's been grown naturally, and that's whole, that's in its fully integrated form. So to me, it's all about, at this point, it's real food. And I wouldn't be able to put anything else into my body at this point.
So you were saying, and I know that a new vision for your life was emerging. And so you were just about to say, so you were thinking about the 5 foods, if you had to have 5 foods.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. So they were like, what were the 5 foods? So it was like, okay, banana, coconut, pineapple, avocado, and papaya or something like that. I thought, you know what? That's okay. I'm moving to my internal compass is pointing to the tropics. What can I do about that? And what happened was in December that would have been 2003, I met a family at a raw Thanksgiving that was moving the next month. It was in November, right? It was in November, Thanksgiving. They were leaving the next month for Costa Rica. And we went around saying why we were thankful. And I remember them saying, we're thankful because we're moving to Costa Rica. They were into raw foods at the time. Mm-hmm. And I just made a mental note on that. I didn't really know them well. We spoke briefly at the event. So what ended up happening was the next year, around May, I went and visited them for a month, that family. I wrote them, and I thought, I need to do this. I'm going to go down for 1 month. I started with a 10-day water fast. I wanted to really clear and clean out and know, okay, I'm coming to this place. I don't know what's going to happen. I ended up doing about a week fast. There were mangoes dropping on the ceiling and like bombs. It sounded all through the night, and I thought, something's calling me. I need to be eating these mangoes. I can't sit here on water with a mango tree and these delicious mangoes like dropping everywhere. So I stopped the fast after 7 days, but it was basically the last week of that month that I made some quick decisions. I was here in Costa Rica. I was presented to someone who had owned the land where we're sitting and needed to sell it. I spoke Spanish because I had spent 3 years in South America, I mentioned before, and had continued with the Spanish in New York, right, playing some of these gigs and things. So everything happened very quickly. I basically had 1 week to make a decision that was life-changing, and that was to energetically connect with a piece of land. Like, you have no idea, like, what that entails. What are the implications of making connection with land where you basically would have the freedom to co-create? You know, nature is a very giving, wonderful teacher in that you're allowed to shape and form her. She just lets you, say, have your way with things. But there are consequences. The learning, the teaching is amazing in that if you do something that's not in harmony, then a plant will die. The life is basically given for your teaching. That's how I feel. There's so much that's being given to us with unconditional love here, you know. And I felt something, a little twinge of that. I didn't know what I was in for. I basically spoke with this man. I saw the land. It was 17 acres. He took me to the back. I was mesmerized by being in the forest, by watching the flowing water. We came to some agreement, right, wrote up a contract with a little down payment, and I remember calling my family, my parents, and said, I'm about to make a big decision. It was basically for me selling everything I had, raising the funds to pay for this and figure out how I would move forward. So basically what I did, I made a decision. I had their support, and I went back to New York for 1 year. I gave myself 1 year, started making payments on the land, let the land lie fallow, and came back a year later and never left. And that's almost like 13 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were having this rapid transformation. You were living in New York City and sort of creating the most grounding, natural life you could have there, right? Like you said, as a nomad. But like I was saying at the beginning of the conversation, that I think, and I lived in New York City a while, and I know that, oh, wow, that disconnection from nature and like trying to find it in every pocket you can. And so how did you do it? Like, so for those of us that might fantasize about that, but think, what would I do? Like, how would I start with a piece of land? Because I think, I know Stephen and I have had that fantasy, and now we're trying to bring that to a reality ourselves. Where can we connect with a piece of land? And probably in the tropics, probably here in Costa Rica. But we get stuck with this. What would we do? We've lived in urban environments our whole life. Like, how did you get started? Did you have skills, or did you just, again, kind of fearlessly begin on your piece of land?
Okay. So what happened was when I came back a year later, I got back in touch with the family that I had originally stayed with. And it turns out, since I was a music teacher, I had been teaching music in New York City, they had bought about 200 contiguous acres down the hill. They had bought a multiple number of farms and put them together. They had an old structure. down below. It did not have electric. There was no fridge, no toilet, no shower. I think they rigged up something with a piece of PVC pipe and a hose or something. And the idea was that I was going to go stay with them in exchange for music lessons for their 2 boys. So I gave music lessons. I stayed in this place. And the idea was there was nothing here on the land, right? So it wasn't that I was coming to anything. There were no structures or anything. And, timing is important too. If you're coming during the rainy season, you want to focus on planting. If you're coming in the dry season, that would be better for building. And so I realized when I was there, it was planting time. So I didn't do anything with structures right away. My focus here was plant, get food in, right? So I had a place. Because it was sort of a small wooden old Tico house, I decided to sleep on the patio. I'm really quite grateful for that first stage because basically it had me sleeping outside. I was using kind of a compost bucket toilet. I was bathing out of a hose. Again, I was living basically out on the porch on the patio for the most part. And a very simple sink, right? And again, no electric, so it was dark at night. And those were my beginnings here. I would come up to the land here. I would make a plan getting trees in. I had to find someone to work with here because, you can't really live alone in the jungle. Everything's growing so fast around you. And I realized that, I needed help. We all need help. We didn't grow up using machetes. We don't know the flora and fauna here. So I met a man named Rafa. Someone introduced me to him, and he basically ended up working 5 years with me here. So I had Rafa by my side, and I followed him around like a child. I was taking baby steps. I got my machete. He showed me how to cut. There was a lot of coffee and heart of palm here. I was cutting down, learning how to cut heart of palm with 2-inch spines on it. You need a special glove. Talk about being present in the moment. When you're cutting something with spines all over, you really have to be present. You have to be right there. So for me to eat, and I wanted to continue to eat mono meals, I needed to go down and be able to cut and get into the heart of the palm, which meant, cutting this palm down, being careful of all the spines and getting through the outer prickly layers, all this with a machete. And I hacked away. Boy, at the beginning, I think I had these hearts of palm in pieces, a little scattered all around until I finally figured out how to do it a little more efficiently. So I would come up here, do some planting. If there was heart of palm, I would go in the field and cut one, have a mono meal, say thank you, eat it there, and leave. It was so great because it's like no mess, no plates, no spoon. So it was really a way of releasing at that time everything that I was accustomed to thinking that I needed to have around me to be comfortable. It wasn't that way. It was almost a game. How much can I release? And all of those no's, no shower, no toilet, no, same thing that happened here on the land. It was a huge yes. It was a yes to more space. It was like no more clutter, minimal belongings, and I guess you could call it a form of minimalism. But I was so enriched. I felt like I had space, I had freedom. I didn't have to sleep in any one place because I was on the floor. I basically used like a thermarest. You familiar with those camping mats? The thermarest was my bed for 10 years, basically. And I brought it with me. Even when I went back to the States, I would sleep on people's anything but their guest room. It was like, can you show me your patio? Can you show me your anywhere where I could get fresh air? And I wanted to keep my head towards pointed north. And I really felt like I could choose. I could finally choose where I slept, how I slept, find maybe a quiet environment in a home, maybe away from carpet, things like that, like getting away from all of this stuff that collects dust. And I think, and things collect dust too. And we have this great saying here that I realized early on. It's basically use it or lose it. So what you find very quickly, even cotton gets eaten up here. Plastics get toasted by the sun and crack and don't last long. You really come into just having what you need. It's need-based living. It's not want-based. It's need-based. And there's so much I could say around that. So anyways, does that give you an idea of sort of how I got started?
Yeah.
Okay.
So obviously you were having a spiritual awakening too. You were devouring all this spiritual literature in New York. Can you talk about, obviously, so we get a little bit of the picture of the external transformation that was happening. Can you talk about maybe a little more about what your days were like, but what was happening on the inside? What kind of transformation was happening for you here?
So once I got up to the land, which was in the 5th or 6th month, we basically, I was able to get a hold of an old Tico house made of, wonderful old hardwoods, deconstructed it, and brought it up here and created like a rancho thatched hut. Okay, so I had my simple living space and a hut with a dirt floor where I kept bananas and fruits and things. So what happened once I was actually on the land, I spent many, many hours in silence and silent observation. And what happened was when I let the words go, and I use the term word fasting, it wasn't intentional, but I realize the power of silence, the power of becoming a receptive vessel. Sometimes the words, I think most of us know, it's really not our highest form of communication. There's much more subtle interactions and things happening at all times around us. I felt like by stopping the word flow, the verbiage, I was able to tap into something like portals of information, so to speak, like greater levels of being and consciousness. Things started coming into me, into my head. Basically, if I was going to say like from a, crown chakra point, I was under the open sky. I was started to sleep under the stars. I felt very drawn to sleep outside. And I created this little kind of a yoga table. It's actually not there anymore. The years wore down the wood, and we finally had to remove it in the grassy area in front of the rancho. I spent many, many nights sleeping under the stars. And there were times when I would wake up just in time to see a shooting star or something. It was absolutely magical. And I was going to write a book called Morning Dew in My Hair, because it was basically the only way you can have morning dew in your hair is to sleep outside under the stars, right? Under the open sky. It was just so amazing to wake up with that in my hair in the morning. And I think it was during that time when I realized that I could truly come into my power, to feel empowered, that the essence of who I was so much greater, than this physical vessel. There was something much, much greater. And I felt like I was finally not only hearing the heartbeat of the mother, Mother Earth, but tapping into a pulse and a vibration that was so transforming, so subtle, so beautiful, so loving. The fear was not a part of this equation. And if you stand back and say, how is it that a woman goes to a foreign country with the foreign language and is living by herself? Women in this country aren't allowed. They wouldn't be allowed to do that. That would be seen as, unacceptable. So, yes, that was on the physical, but by doing that, it allowed me to tap into what I feel was the spiritual part of things here, which for me mostly happens in the silence. It's a feeling of knowing that I have everything that I need on the physical plane, that I'm here to inspire in spirit, right? The word inspiration comes from the words in spirit. To inspirit myself and others by creating sort of a sanctuary-like place where others can come and transform. So I've transformed here. It's now time to open space so others can transform, and my part in that. As a space provider and a space holder, I have much to say via words because so much has come in that I want to share, But just being here and being surrounded by nature is a spiritual experience. There's no other way. There's nothing you need to do and nowhere you need to go. It's right here. And I'm in a place where it's all around me. Talk about surround sound. It's just amazing. So I feel in spirit at all times. I really do. I mean, yes, and the silence is when I feel closest to whatever the higher voice, whether it's the inner voice or the teachings that I think are there for us. I think we need to be near nature to access that kind of information.
Kind of leads right into what I wanted to ask you about next, which is, so I can I can feel all of that being here. It's very obvious. And we'll have images with the post, but maybe you can talk a little bit about what you've created here, like how you've created it, how you continue to create it as a place to inspire you and others. What's so important about the way you've created this place, co-created this place with nature, and maybe, some of the work that you do with others.
Okay. So the first 5 years here, I consider like a seeding time. I lived alone, which I always say is the words all one. The word alone comes from all one. So I was kind of living in the oneness. And I'm not even into using the word my, but I would say into the oneness of this person. I was just learning and listening and observing and perceiving. And it was around the 5th year mark. Some things happened. There were some people came through and took some stuff. Little events happened. But around the 5th or 6th year mark, so I had planted my fruit forest. I'd put in over 2,500 hardwoods. I started planting flowers. So the idea was fruit, food, beauty, flowers, hardwoods, reforestation of parts in the back. I was feeling that I wanted the presence of someone else here on the land. And I didn't know what it would be, if it would be a friend, a lover, a partner, And I put that out there to the universe. And that's when I always say, right, be careful what you ask for, because it can, when your will and intention is clear, basically we've all heard the phrase this instant manifestation. I think what that means is when you are so aligned with your clarity of what you want, it can come blazing in before you. So I always say, be careful what you ask for, because it can come in before you're ready to receive it. So basically this guy, Bill, shows up from New Jersey. He had been in Costa Rica a little while. And he must have caught my eye literally at market, or near the market in town. I went to buy some trees from a friend of his, I think is what happened. And he showed up with his friend. And we had there, something happened there, and he felt, I want to get to know that woman. And he was the guy that ended up, we got back in touch, and he wanted to come for a farm tour. And he ended up actually moving into this family that had a rental structure, the same family that I ended up living in years, previously, which is kind of a coincidence. So that's Bill from New Jersey. He came up for a farm tour, and we spoke a bit, and he started coming back to visit me in the afternoons. We both did what we needed to do, and I got to know him. It was quite beautiful because I basically got to know Bill in the dark. He'd come in the afternoon. As you know, it gets very dark very early here in the tropics. So by 5:36, it's dark. We'd sit on the rancho, and it got dark, and I didn't have overhead lighting. I was very clear. In fact, I'm at a point now where I can feel a light bulb shining up over my head. I'm very aware of artificial lighting. I didn't get much into that before when I was talking about vision. But I feel that if possible, we should, adhere to natural lighting and and that the implication of flipping on a light switch at night is huge. I think we have no idea. It's creating artificial daylight. And we continue to do activities that should have been long done. And it doesn't help us settle down. It doesn't help us to reconnect. It doesn't help us to have our natural gaze go back up to the stars, to the cosmic vibration, all of the stuff that's happening, that we've created the boxes that we live in. So we're shut out from all of this stuff.
Computers and cell phones.
Yeah, computers and cell phones. I mean, when do we finally turn them off? Do people go to sleep with their phones on? I would definitely turn off Wi-Fi systems at night. The problem is the way people live now, you can turn yours off, but your neighbors. So we have all these Wi-Fi zones going at night. If we start getting into that realm of what's happening out there, all I can say that here is that we make a big effort not to have Wi-Fi going. It's only when needed. So we have access points where when you need Wi-Fi, we use it, and when you're done, you turn it off. And I consider that a consideration for your neighbor, for anyone else that's here on the grounds. We want this to be like basically Wi-Fi free unless needed. We have Ethernet connections and so forth, so that we can connect with this true vibration, the true current, so to speak. By the way, we didn't talk a whole lot about earthing and barefoot, but it's also it's so huge. I feel like when humans started wearing shoes, we quickly lost respect and humility for the earth. What happens when you don't wear shoes? I would tell people, if you're trying to slow down and you think life is going too fast, try taking off your shoes and let's see how fast you walk down city streets. And where you start paying attention when you don't have shoes on, you're going to start looking down and you're going to pay attention to every step. So when we're out in nature and when I'm taking my daily walks into the forest, I come across raids of ants that are passing the trail. Absolutely stop me in my tracks. Wasp's nest, I had an encounter with a fer-de-lance. I was barefoot, but I was actually collecting leaf matter. And I reached my hand in a pile and I got bit. And then I saw the snake. And that was a great lesson, too, about where I put my hands and all of that. But so much awareness and so much respect and so much humility. And I remember there was a saying, I don't know which chief it was, but one of the Native American elders basically said that when the white man starts wearing shoes, they're going to go crazy. So it's basically, it used to be leather shoes and moccasins where at least are grounding and earthing, but today it's all rubber. So we're pulling not only fossil fuels where they should have never come out of the belly of the earth. The fossil fuels have their reason that they're there. And we're creating rubber and all of these products, which in the end are so toxic, right, for us. And it was our big disconnect. So by me coming here and taking my shoes off and spending hours and hours a day, as much as I can actually, doing my work on a dirt floor when I can, I found that the earth, and I've also read this to be true, the earth has a stabilizing magnetic current that stabilizes our current, our electromagnetic field. So what happens when you disconnect and you're wearing shoes all the time? We develop static electricity, basically, build up in our body. And I always ask people, have you ever noticed the third prong on the plugs we use for computers? It's not two. There's a third one that's round. That's a ground. We're very careful to ground all of our appliances. We wouldn't think of not grounding a refrigerator, a computer. I ask people, why are we grounding them? What's for? Well, if you don't, there could be some friction. There might be static buildup. You might have a malfunction. Well, hello. Basically that's us in a nutshell. We're not grounding, and we're not grounded. And so what are the symptoms of non-grounding? Anxiety, irritability, depression, lack of purposeness, lack of connection. I can't even tell you, the feeling. In a way, I am writing a book. It's of these little short chapters that have little sayings about practices that we can do in our life that make us more connected to the earth. And one of them I came up with is called Wafe Mode. And you might say, well, what's that? What's Wafe Mode? Well, each syllable, Wafe Mode, is the two first letters of 4 words that I highly recommend as a highly beneficial practice. And that stands for warm feet on morning dew. Okay, Wafe Mode. And what that means is that at night, we're so removed from the stars and the celestial bodies, but there's a very, very high charge potency that's created in the tiny drops of water that are on the tips of the blades of grass. If in the morning when you see those dewdrops or whatever on the tips of the blades, after the sun comes out, at some point they kind of melt and fall away. You want to walk with your toasty warm feet on those basically drops of morning dew. They're highly charged. They've been out all under the stars. It's a highly beneficial practice. And the coolness that you feel. Now, obviously, if there's ice all over, you can't do that in snow and so forth. But this is one of the practices that when I start my day this way, I go into so much gratitude and immediately connect. So I even notice the difference sometimes just being, if I'm on the floor in the structure on a bed all night, I miss the connection. So, I make sure that every day I am out either in the morning or I take daily walks in the forest. I pretty much bathe in the creek. I don't use the showers. I'm not really into hot water. I know I'm deviating it here. I'll get back to your talking about what's been created here, but it's all part of that realization. So being barefoot, standing, whether you're on dry land or actually in a body of water, there's an electric current that's happening in all the water bodies. It's basically living water. It's water that's charged, highly charged. I think many people have checked out this recent studies on water, right? And the crystals that appear. So if you can imagine the water that's been recycled on this earth time after time, it goes up, the water evaporates, goes up in the sky, falls back down as rain, recharges the creeks and our springs and so forth. That water is carrying a lot of information. It's carrying the history of the human race. It's carrying even beyond that. When I bathe in that water, there's so much happening beyond the physical cleansing that I'm receiving. I feel like I'm tapping again into another portal of time, of information. The cool refreshingness is incredible. I feel like it's an aura cleansing. So I'm talk about spiritual, like when I bathe, it's, if you want to use the word baptism or whatever, it's a spiritual cleansing every single time I enter those waters. Basically, it's totally sacred. They're very clean waters here. They're coming from high up. There's no cows. There's no farms up there. You can see looking right up the mountain. What an honor to bathe in that flowing water. It's alive. So if I'm going to be concerned about putting living foods in my body, then I should also be concerned about bathing in living water. And what we have in the cityscape, the environment that we live in today, we're bathing, and I'm going to just use the word dead. We're basically bathing in dead water. We're drinking dead water. Once water is removed from sunlight and from flowing in a natural spiral motion, water needs to flow, and it creates sort of its own breaks and spirals. Just watch flowing water, how it hits against rocks. It loses its life force, So how is it possible that we're 70% water, our bodies at least, the earth is 70% water? Okay, how is it possible that we're even able to survive on water that's no longer alive, that's dead? I'm really amazed when I figure what's coming out of most kitchen sinks today. And so when I came to Costa Rica, I was basically down to three things, and I feel like they're my birthright. I feel like I have to have these three things in order to arrive to the highest place of consciousness and highest place of purpose in this lifetime. They're on the physical plane, but by having those three things, it allows you to elevate into the spiritual. And that would be clean air, pure water, and fertile land. Those three things were all I wanted and needed when I left the States. And that's what I've come here for. That's my basis here. And with that, everything else has followed. So when I think of pure water, that means bathing. I was bathing, finding new ways of bathing and elimination, new ways of movement. I released clothing for long periods at a time. There were times when not until maybe 5 p.m. at night, I would put clothing on because I was here in my oneness. There was no one else here. There was no shame. We were all natural here. And I wanted to be as vulnerable and open to everything else. I wanted to feel the wind current on my body. I wanted to feel the sun. The first time that I ever felt the sun sparkling on my backside, it was an amazing feeling to walk naturally through the land here. It gave me so much insight. My feet were determining how the contours of the land were moving, the temperature of the earth. My skin was finally feeling the slight subtle wind changes. I was caressing plants as I walked. And for that meant to me that those plants, all my babies, I planted thousands of little babies here. I'm sitting in their shade now. I'm eating the fruit. And what I wanted to do at that point was take the fruit of my body, what we call my elimination, which is such amazing food for microorganisms, and create food. I was creating black earth from what came from my body and the fruit scraps and grass clippings, creating this amazing, this black earth that I gave to the fruit tree. The fruit tree ate of my body. I was eating of the fruit tree body. It was just this incredible experience. I finally completed the food chain cycle. I thought, oh my goodness, this is truly magical. Food is now my medicine. I know these plants intimately. I started reading the Ringing Cedar series of the Anastasia books. I don't know if you've heard of those books.
Yeah.
Here I am reading, like, there were 9 of those books, and I'm sleeping under the stars and reading about this mythical figure, this woman out in the Siberian taiga forests. Had such deep connection. I knew that, instantly, again, just looking up at the sky, via that, you can connect anywhere, anytime. It's all instant if we're open to it and want it to be. And I felt blessings. I felt from her. I don't know if she exists or not, but I know that supposedly she's channeling a lot of information to the Dakhnas, the people growing food out in Russia on grants of land that they've been given, like on hectares, right, 2.5 acre plots. So I was just very connected and realizing how little I needed. So anyways, so on that, back to the 5th year mark, Bill comes in. He says, basically, he decides to move here. We agree that, he can move in. He says, I really appreciate your lifestyle. I totally respect and admire what you're doing. But I personally, I've got a car. I've got stuff. I got a surfboard. I've got tools. I need a safe place to put them. I don't want to park my car up on the road. So all of these things were basically, I thought, okay, here's some compromise. I was basically blissed out here. And, but I realized it's time for some compromise and some opening up, So Bill moved in. We had to create it so he could park in the land. He said he wanted a flush toilet. He wanted a refrigerator. He wanted things like normal people have, So we started by building a secure bodega. Bodega's like a shed. And we put that in so he could put his stuff somewhere. I really didn't have stuff. It was such joyful for me to live so minimally. And I was hand washing all my clothes, and I was eating. I didn't really need the refrigerator, and I wasn't doing any cooking, of course. So we had to get all that stuff. And we decided to take that. So we put in the bodega. We had now a secure space. I was very adamant about not having domesticated animals on the land. I feel like, one of the reasons I'm here is to listen, to observe, to be in my full expression. And I've found that the dogs here, there's so many dogs here, and I've been bit actually 3 times here in Costa Rica. I feel like I've met my quota. I think dogs have, we've kind of bred them to be quite aggressive, and they chase the wildlife here. And I remember noticing that if you have dogs, you sometimes don't have the small, low-lying, beautiful songbirds' nests. Because we don't have domesticated animals here, we're just letting the wildlife be and exist. We've got nests in every little hummingbird nest, knee height, and things like that. Nothing's being chased in that way, and so I'm grateful. But because we didn't have a dog, which most people do for an alarm type thing, we set up the bodega. It's quite secure, so we could leave the farm, basically, and leave the farm, if you want to say, unattended, so to speak. What happened was, because we built that bodega, we decided to build on top of it, and everything else follows. You've seen some of the structures here. We built on top of the bodega, and from there, so that meant a second floor, and we started building out the top floor and bottom floor, and that came to be what we call the lodge, or Casa Grande. We've also called it Casa Manglio. It's made of amazing branches, and it's all hardwoods and so forth. So we built that. And then we decided that we wanted to build an additional area for guests. We didn't know if we'd do Airbnb, retreats, things like that. And we created something called the Forest Suite. It's called Casa Bosque, which is where we're sitting right now. Which has a really nice balcony, goes out under the stars. And we've set this up so that people can come here and basically retreat. It could be this space could be used as part of a group retreat, which we're open to people coming and hosting the retreats here, or basically people who are coming to retreat, which might be spending time in silence. It might mean write a book. Just be. It's not even about coming here and having your day full of a million activities. Those are there. You can go down to the beach and you can do your day trips. But what this is all about is tapping into something that's so subtle, so amazing, so beautiful, so tranquil. Our true nature, the true essence. I feel like it's all right in front of us. We just need to be in a place where we can open our eyes and be receptive to it. And we're hoping to create that sanctuary-like space here. If we had time at the beginning, I forgot, but I would have liked to just have this recording going for one moment in silence.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of the sounds are coming in. But, like an onion, sometimes it takes days to peel those outer layers off, the dirty outer layers, to get into the clean inner layers. It can take days. It could take weeks for some people. We have so much swirling around in our heads. I feel like here is finally when I was able to get to a place of inner quiet. There's definitely outer quiet here, but how do I get to that inner place? I'm hearing
Sophia.
I'm hearing Sophia out there. I heard a little beautiful 2-year-old daughter. Yeah, that's a beautiful natural sound.
Well, I know we should wrap up soon. You've said it in a lot of different ways, and you just started to, and thinking about what you hope for people to achieve when they come and just be here. But maybe you could, just from your vast experience, your own and with others, just say maybe, everyone, so many people crave being in nature. What is happening to people who are disconnected, and what can happen when they come here or have a life like this?
So when I think of disconnect, I think of all of the box living that's happening out there. People are basically spending all their time in a house box, a car box, a work box, or a shopping, some kind of a supermarket box. And the box living is a total disconnect. So not only are we can't see the sky anymore, but we can't touch the earth either. It's not that we can't, but we're not. We've removed ourselves. The human species is the only species that I can think of that has actually physically removed themselves off the earth. It's where we touch, it's where we ground. So, I would tell people in a cityscape environment, when you're sort of stuck in those boxes, one thing might be to try not flipping on that light switch when it gets dark. Just light a candle. Where is natural light entering your home? Do you have a street light blazing in your window? Where are you sleeping and how are you sleeping? Is it sacred space? Do you sleep well? Is your Wi-Fi system turned on? Can you turn it off? At least in your own, create a sanctuary, so at least you can get rest. Because if we don't have enough profound rest at night, the next thing I would be looking into is my water. What ends up happening is our water becomes so tainted, we have to buy more and more expensive fixtures just to clean it up. Try to get the most pure water you can. And even if you can find a source where you can get water, and then I guess most people are doing that anyways, bottled water and things. Research your bottled water sources. There's some sources out there, Fiji water and some other waters that are much, much greater than others. It's important, your water. You are water. The earth is mostly water. Get the purest, cleanest water that you can. It's worth it. The next thing would be food. Organic, local. Meet your farmers. I actually don't use supermarkets anymore. I stopped going into supermarkets a long time ago. You need to get food that's recently picked and does not have a shelf life, right? And eat more fresh food more often. So food is important. Again, you are very much what you eat. So if you're not feeling great, listen in, check out what's going in your mouth. Another thing is pay attention what's coming out of your mouth, not just what's going in. So like our words and our verbiage, verbal abuse, we don't go around hitting people, but we send out a lot of daggers with our words. We really need to be aware of what's coming out of our mouth. Sometimes it may be better just to go into silence. I think it's in silence where we can slow down a little bit. Taking time for silence. It's okay to do word fasting. I think word fasting is as or more important than food fasting. And I think if we eat healthy, then we're naturally food fasting anywhere. Like for example, it's highly beneficial to, can you stop eating by dark? And our natural rhythm of things, humans, we don't see well in the dark. So if you were in a city and all the lights went out and you couldn't see, would you be walking around that city at night, tripping over things? Like in a natural setting, we don't do many of the activities we're doing in cityscapes. So if you want to try to move in that direction, I would ask you to do what you could only do in a natural setting, and get outside. You got to earth. I have a practice, one of my little chapters, I was talking about, it's called sea bathing. And seas is the word, SEA. Sea bathing sounds like we're bathing in water, right? But actually C is sunbathing, E is earthing, and A is air bathing. If every day we could get some sunbathing, and I feel not to be afraid of the sun. The sun absolutely lets you know when you've had enough. Because if you don't put on all the sunscreens and the harmful lotions, the sun's going to tell you when you've had it. You're going to get a headache. You're going to start turning red. You're going to feel like you're burned. Well, that's the sign to get out of the sun. So we need the sun. I keep hearing people are taking vitamin D. I really, we need the sun. If you could get in some sunbathing, earthing, which is get your bare feet on the ground, and air bathing, which means release all this clothing. If there's a time when you can have fresh air flowing on your body, these are practices I think that are beneficial and can happen in the cityscape. And then when you come here, it's, the sanctuary-like space, it's been created in a way where you can basically come here and be in comfort. We're not asking people to come here and rough it and sleep on the floor. I'm not asking anyone to do what I did and sleep necessarily under the stars. If you want, there's a beautiful balcony you can sleep on. We want people to be comfortable, And I find that, when we get to a new place, and especially if we're not used to our surroundings, we often move in sort of a spiral fashion, which means we stay home, we stay in our little room, and slowly but surely we start exploring. And that spiral widens and widens and widens, So I'm very familiar with the grounds, and I go out into the back every day. And I think people, once they come here, will slowly but surely check out more and more of the grounds, take their shoes off. We've got walking trails. We have a beautiful grassy area that we put in sod, especially so people can walk barefoot. Come out in the morning and get your feet on the morning dew. There's lots of beautiful practices that we can share, that we do here as part of life, and in the way we empower ourselves. And I hope other people will come and experience and tap into that. Because what can happen is, it's not saying that you need to change where you're living. It's to come here basically and be completely transformed in a way that, when you go back, you're not the same person that you were. That you'll look at things with new eyes and maybe start making small changes that will simplify your life and let you see maybe the grander picture. It's not just about just making it and just paying your debts off, and just scraping by and just having enough money for this. I just want to mention something real quick. You had a question about income and how do you earn income. I think you had a list. No, maybe not on this particular. There was a question list you had sent me. Oh. The whole idea of income is to me. Your daughter's probably. I just want to say this: is the idea of income is like what's coming in. And I don't necessarily equate income with money. It's like what's coming in that makes me less and less dependent on the fiat currency system, on having to earn paper money, which has no backing and one day may not be worth anything. So come here and earn income. It's a different kind of income, but there's so much to come forth to bring in, Thank you.
It's so wonderful. And we have 3 questions we usually ask at the end of every podcast. We'll see how this goes. Actually, the second one I think you just answered, so we'll just do the first and third. The first is, what book or books up to 3 would you recommend that every person should read?
So I came across the writings of Victor Schauberger, an incredible genius who was born in Austria, and he was a steward in the forests for some of the noble, I'm not sure, it was a prince in Austria, back in the early 1900s. And the book is marvelous. Victor Schauberger wrote an ecotechnology series. It comprises a set of 5 books, and the one that I've most enjoyed is called Nature as Teacher. What he has to say, is so profound. He basically turns a lot of our ways of thinking on its head and explains from his own realizations and what he came into. I highly recommend the works of Victor Schauberger. There's this specific book of one of this ecotechnology series called Nature as Teacher. I also love the Anastasia series of books through Ringing Cedars, and I recommend people just for a start by reading book 1. It's called Anastasia. But if I had to limit it, I would, Victor Schauberger, I think is something I'm hoping everyone can check him out. He's absolutely amazing. Wow. Amazing what he has to say.
I can't wait to check those out.
Yeah.
You already answered the second question, which is what you would recommend that a person in the Matrix try now. So I'm going to skip to the third. And the third and final question is, what are you most excited about now?
So I think I could say we're still under construction, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I've been here 12 to 13 years, and I think I'm excited about being a sacred space holder and helping people on their own. I mean, it's really a process of self-realization while we're all here, but providing the environment, the safe space, the sacred space for people to really self-realize and to come into their true empowerment. I have much to say, but also much not to say, because in the silence, I think just giving people a place where they can be silent and come to their own conclusions. I'm really looking forward. I've seen it happen here, and I'm looking forward to it happening more. I have, and many other projects going, organic certification of the farm and growing food, and my own realizations with working with the microbiology of the soil. I'm excited about all these things, and I have to say, every day when I'm walking through the grounds here, I'm inside my head, I'm constantly saying, wow, oh my God, I can't, wow. All day long, it's like it's magical, it's mystical, it's mythical, it's enchanting, and I want people to experience magic and enchantment and come back to something that I just don't feel that cityscapes can provide. So may all people have a chance to experience something that's so amazing and so magical, and may it touch all of your hearts as it has mine. Thank you.
Well, Amy, so now it's time for my part of the interview. No, I'm kidding. No, we're going to wrap up. So we've been here with Amy and our daughter, and so I've been looking after Sophia, and she sort of sniffed the trail of where you guys were talking, so we just wandered over. But we've had this time being on your land, and it really has an influence of its own. It's not like you need to do anything, although maybe certain rituals or rites or practices would be welcomed, but there's a real influence made by the environment, the setting, and what feels to me like the energy that you've given to it. The way things are organized and the thought that's clearly here. And anyway, it's a gift just to be here on the land, receiving what it has to share. So I guess before we officially wrap up, where can people connect with you online? Where would you like folks to visit you on the internet? And what's coming up for you that maybe we should know about?
Okay. So we have a website called Homestead CR, one word, www.homesteadcr.com. And on the website, we've got a number of photos of happenings and harvests that have happened on the farm. We have our structures, lodging available for short-term stays. We've got basically a retreat space set up. We're also on the website. There's rentals and properties for sale. These are all properties for sale by owner that we think would make good homesteads. And we're trying to provide ways for people to experience this, amazing connection with nature, either short-term, which would be a short-term stay at the lodge here, through a retreat, so in a group setting, or long-term, which might mean a long-term rental or connecting with the piece of land, appropriating a piece of land to co-create for someone else to create their own little paradise. There'll be another website coming out called Amy Zing Natural Products. So it's a product line of things that will be made from the farm, making natural sodas now with probiotics and dried fruits. I've got a pipa popper. It's a super cool coconut opener that I had to develop out of need because I had cut my wrist a couple times with those machetes.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a need-based invention. It's super in stainless steel, and that's been kind of fun. So those are two websites I could direct people to. And I'm not really in the social media. Bill does more of that, but we do have a Homestead CR. There's Facebook, and if you type in my name, there's a number of YouTube interviews that come up that other people have posted throughout the year. I'm not so much into self-promotion. I feel like if a message needs to get out there, it does. It's not that so it's not really my way, but there's a number of things on YouTube as well.
Yeah, nice. So we won't be seeing you at all the big, hot marketing conferences throughout the U.S. 2018.
Maybe not.
No, well, our hope is to expand your visibility in what you're doing and your mission and this beautiful location for people to access and learn about. That's kind of what we feel like our job is. Well, we should wrap up. Our system's almost out of power, and we have a hungry child. So, but thank you for this. I can't wait to hear the interview. I really can. I'm sure Teresa will tell me all about it as we drive home. But thank you for your time and your welcoming us into your beautiful space here. It's been very special.
You're very welcome. And let's eat. We got a nice meal ready. Thank you. Thanks to you guys. Thank you.
That's it for this week's Ownstream podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this wonderful interview with Amy Schrift. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode for links to everything mentioned, including her website, links to all the books and authors she listed, and the other resources discussed. Plus, we will include some unique photos and video we shot of her beautiful farm, too. All of that can be found at ownstream.co/Amy Schrift. That's ownstream.co/AMYSCHRIFT.
Also, please sign up for our weekly tip-off email at ownstream.co and just click the sign up button in the upper right-hand corner. This is where we share each Monday 3 cool things we've learned in the last week in the areas of lifestyle, business, and spirit. This could be an amazing quote, individual tip, or tool designed to bring you more freedom and more power in your life. So definitely sign up for that again at ownstream.co and just click sign up.
Finally, please leave us a review on iTunes. We definitely need your help in expanding our reach, helping us to inspire more people and spread the amazing ideas discussed on this episode with Amy Schrift and others too. If it feels right to you, simply go to iTunes, search for the Ownstream podcast, click ratings and reviews, then click that 5th star and leave us a brief comment on how this episode has inspired you. Thank you so much for considering that. We are very grateful. Also, we're on Twitter and Facebook at Ownstream, and on Instagram, where we post regularly at own_stream. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Ownstream podcast. To learn more and connect with us, please visit ownstream.co or follow us on Twitter at Ownstream and Instagram at own_stream.